All right, welcome to Let's Talk, May 18th, 2018. So the subject for today is basically the main subject is Jaiva Dharma. Here's a English translation of Jaiva Dharma, a very excellent translation of Jaiva Dharma by Bhaktivinoda Thakura. And this translation is by our godbrother Sarvabhauma. Sarvabhauma, who was originally from Bengal, so his mother language is Bengali. And he's a disciple of Srila Prabhupada. And he's a very good preacher. He's also had association with Srila Sridhara Maharaj and with Srila Bhakti Pramod Puri Maharaj. And he preaches in Bengal and in Germany and possibly some other places in Europe. So highly recommend this translation of the Jaiva Dharma. Where are we? There we go. For anyone who would like to read a comprehensive and well-translated version of Bhaktivinoda Thakura's Jaiva Dharma. Okay, so that's the main topic for today. But along with that, we're going to discuss in some depth, along with the importance of Jaiva Dharma, Bhaktivinoda, etc. We're going to focus on the eternal nature of Jaiva Dharma in contrast to what some people have preferred to call the novel Jaiva Dharma. And the novel meaning that the stories are not true, or that it's fictitious. It's a work of novel, it's a work of fiction, it's a work of imagination, but that it contains the proper Gaudiya philosophy. Well, there's yet even another opinion that not only it is a novel and not only is it an imaginary, but the philosophies, certain aspects of the philosophies, Gaudiya Vaiṣṇava philosophies that are presented in the Jaiva Dharma are also being considered as imaginary or as a preaching strategy, etc. Now, yes, and so we're going to get into a couple of these issues also, because it's all about Jaiva Dharma. All right, so if I don't space it out here, there's a couple things in my mind that seem to keep jumping out this morning. I can't seem to be remembering very well. Okay, so we'll just see where this goes, how this goes. There's quite a bit of material, quotes and excerpts that we've chosen to read, but being that this is like a talk program, extensive readings might be boring to the audience. So what I might do is I might just jump in and interrupt, make a comment, or open some discussion there. And it's a possibility also all the material that we have that we thought we might read, well, we might not read it. It might just be too much material for reading and thus making the presentation a little boring. But if it seems to be going well, we'll read through all the material we have as well as have discussions. All right, so first, Goswami, I'd like to request you to read those sections of the quotes that we've outlined there, beginning with the transcribed from 11/27/1983. So would you begin that for us, please?
Hare Krishna. So devotee asked the question. My question is that the Brihat Bhagavat Amrita, what was spoken by Maharaj Parikshit to Mother Uttara, that is not mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Where did he get that from? The story that he told of Gopa Kumara.
All right, so first, just let me give some little background here before we hear Srila Sridhara Maharaj's explanation to that question. Brihat Bhagavatam Amrita is the book that he's inquiring about. And Brihat Bhagavatam Amrita is written by Sanatana Goswami. And the very name itself suggests what should be, or what one would imagine would be inside the book, reading the book. Brihat Bhagavatam Amrita. An English translation means the great nectar of Srimad Bhagavatam. So let me give you an example. If any of us were tasked with the exercise of presenting the nectar of Bhagavad Gita, the Brihat Bhagavad Gita Amrita, the great nectar of the Bhagavatam. Well, we would then, not Bhagavatam, but Bhagavad Gita, then we would naturally select 4, which have been done many times, the 4 quintessential verses of the Gita, as there are 4 quintessential verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. We would include those, and maybe we would expand to numerous other verses of the Gita. So one might imagine, and this devotee asking the question is certainly thinking like that the great nectar of the Srimad Bhagavatam, presented as the Brihat Bhagavatam Amrita, well, it should contain the most nectarine or valuable or instructive stories that we have in Srimad Bhagavatam, because Srimad Bhagavatam, in essence, is one narration of story, lila, pastimes, incidences, occurrences, one after the other, after the other, after the other, after the other, all the way up to 10th canto and the lila of Krishna and beyond, even predicting some of the future activities, what will occur in Kali Yuga, etc. You follow me on this?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So one would naturally think then the great nectar of the Bhagavatam would include, say, 4, 5, 6, whatever, 8 of the most important stories. Well, the reader is first surprised going along in Brihat Bhagavatam Rita, and having completed the book, one realizes there wasn't a repeat of any of the stories in the Srimad Bhagavatam. None of the stories of Srimad Bhagavatam, none of the pastimes, none of the Leelas in 10th canto, nada. Nothing is repeated. Some of the personalities mentioned in Brihat Bhagavatam Amrita are also mentioned, particularly in the first half of Brihat Bhagavatam Amrita. But none of the actual incidences, pastimes, occurrences, Leelas, etc. They're all different. So it's important to mention in the beginning that Brihat Bhagavatam Amrita is indeed the great nectar of Srimad Bhagavatam, but it focuses in and magnifies on the substance of the Bhagavatam, that which is to be understood, that which is to be followed, that which is to be gained, and not just on the external aspect of the substance. The external aspect being this incident, this pastime, this activity, this rishi did this, went there, said this, Kardama Muni, Lord Brahma, all these different stories and instances that are there, Pandavas, etc. None of those stories, but what is to be the greatest gain and wealth that one is to derive from the Srimad Bhagavatam, which often escapes us, especially we who are the neophytes. It's very easy that it escapes us. So this Brihat Bhagavatam Amrita, it condenses that essence, but in a whole new list of stories, pastimes, activities, etc. So, yes. All right, so Goswami, the question has been asked. I've given some background to Brihat Bhagavatam Rita, what it actually is. Now, Srila Sridhara Maharaj will give us his answer to that question.
Yes, he says, Sridhar Maharaj says, you say, where from this Brihat Bhagavatam Rita came? Devotee, yes. Srila Maharaj. Brihat Bhagavatam Rita, Mahabharat, the Veda, where do they come from? It is already there, floating. It is all nitya, eternal. Forms of knowledge are all floating in the eternal world. In so many rishis, they come to this plane. But it is already there. All nitya means eternal. Eternally existing. All these ideas in different shapes and ways. So what is not floating this time, a particular cloud, is not floating this time, but it does not mean that it won't float at another time, or that it won't float in a future sky. So the eternal sky is holding all these things, and sometimes something is coming through someone. So that story is an eternal characteristic of God. And through Sanatan, that has been explained. Sanatana Goswami explains that, quote, "I am not writing this myself, but someone is forcing my pen to write in this way. Have you marked this?" He says that, quote, "This writing is not mine. Someone is forcing me to go on writing," end quote. What audacity I have got that I am describing the character of the friends of Krishna himself? Here I am, and where are they? And I am describing their character. It is not mine. Someone is forcing me to write this.
All right, let me interrupt here for a second and recall to memory. We don't have the particular reference, but I don't think this quote is, it's a Prabhupada said. I don't think it's inaccurate, and I don't think anyone would say that it never happened. So I believe it was in Vrindavan. I'm not sure about the place, and I think a very good reference to that would be maybe the memoirs of Tamal Krishna Goswami or Harisari Prabhu, or someone who was very close to Srila Prabhupada on a regular daily basis during the years from 76 through 77, etc. So the Prabhupada said is that Srila Prabhupada's books were being read, and he was listening. He was listening to, I believe, Srimad Bhagavatam. And Srila Prabhupada interrupted the reading and said, so here's your Prabhupada said. Prabhupada said, "I have not written these books. Krishna himself has written. And he may have added through me. Or it may have just..."
There's two places he said this. One is in Jakarta.
Okay.
He said, "These are not my books." He said, these are, I'm simply translating. They are written by Vyasadeva. They are his books. Mm-hmm. In Los Angeles, he said, "These are Krishna's books. They are not mine."
Yes, I think there's yet this other incident, and it made. Sometimes we have to accept the very fact that everything that His Divine Grace said wasn't recorded. But it was heard, and okay, there we enter into, well, did they hear accurately? Are they remembering accurately? So this Prabhupada said that I'm presenting you is the one I have always heard, but whether this one occurred or not, or I got it right or not, the backup is there. Yes, these are not my books. These are Krishna's books. And he's not just referring to the verses, obviously. The Bhagavatam is not his. Vyasa wrote the Bhagavatam, you see. But I think more so he's speaking to the whole presentation, including the purports. And even there, if one has done a careful study on Srila Prabhupada's purports, especially something like the Nectar of Devotion, the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, it's almost more of a translation work than it is a commentary work. In fact, paragraph after paragraph after paragraph after paragraph, if you compare it to the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu with various commentaries, you'll see that paragraph after paragraph after paragraph of the Nectar of Devotion is simply a translation of the commentaries of previous acharyas, but he's not saying, and such acharya has said, and such acharya has said. I mean, you can run page after page after page before you come upon a part of a paragraph or a paragraph that is originally, that Srila Prabhupada himself has fully written. So, once again, yes, these are Krishna's books, or these are Mahaprabhu's books, but I think also he's referring to his commentary, that this is not his, this is also Krishna, just as it is being said there, what was that? "I'm not writing this myself, but someone is forcing my pen." And there's also a very nice narration from Gita Govinda, and I first heard this from Jadharani Devi Dasi, Prabhupada's disciple, when she was giving one of these Prabhupada memory nights at Mayapur back in the 90s. And I attended one in a pandal one evening. And there were various people coming up on the stage and giving some memories of His Divine Grace. And then Jadharani was invited to the stage. I think it was 94. Anyway, again, I don't remember all these things in detail. So anyway, she gave she said that once, way back in like 22nd Avenue days, so late 1960s, maybe 66, 7, 8, something like that. She said that once Srila Prabhupada spoke to her, that she was sitting in Prabhupada's room, and he told her the story of Jayadeva Goswami attempting to write a verse in which the superior position appeared to be given to Srimati Radharani, and that Krishna himself was begging for the foot dust of Srimati Radharani. Giri, do you recall the verse I'm speaking about?
Dehi you got him, yeah. Famous verse.
How's it?
Dehi Parapalavi you got him.
All right, very famous verse. That's the beginning of it. And Jayadev, when he felt himself going to write this verse, he felt, oh, what is this? Is this some contamination, or how is this? He stopped. He wouldn't write it. He thought, this is not right. This is maybe some contaminated something has entered, and I'm attempting to write such a verse. And so he gave it up, and he went to the river. Anyway, I'm going to cut that story short. He came back and discovered that the verse had been written on his paper, on his palm leaf, whatever he was writing on. The verse was completed, and he came to understand that Krishna himself appeared and wrote that verse. So Prabhupada told this to Jadharani way back in the 1960s. And there are many connotations to this verse that Krishna himself was inspiring Jayadev to write. But when Jayadev hesitated, it was such a high subject matter. That's another connotation that Gaudiyas are actually Suddha Shaktas. We worship the Shakti of Krishna more than we worship Krishna himself. This is also another point that's made there in this verse. But this Jayadev was being compelled to write this, but he couldn't. He withdrew. So Krishna himself came and wrote the verse. So it's pretty standard that throughout history and the acharyas of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, that Krishna himself writes through the acharya, or the acharya writes of something which is already eternal. And that's what we're discussing here, the nature of Jaiva Dharma. It is not a novel. It is not imaginary. No part of it is imaginary, neither the incidences in the groves and the meetings between the Vaishnavas in the book, nor is any part of the Siddhanta imaginary, or as some people have suggested, just a preaching strategy. No. And we're going to give some quotes here and hear from Sridhara Maharaj more about that. And then we're going to get into some of the Siddhantic issues, just lightly, not super in depth. We're going to get into the issue of Jiva Tattva and what is known as the anadi-karma. All right, so Goswami, would you kindly continue the reading?
Yes. So Srila Maharaj continues. So divinity comes down. Eternity comes down to someone here. Kaviraj Goswami says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela 878, actually, Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita is not my writing, but the dictation of Sri Madan Mohan. My writing is like the repetition of a parrot.
So, let me interrupt. Again, you have it, and again and again and again, we'll find this same thing being repeated over centuries. But here's what happens. There's a tendency to look backwards and say, these were the saints. Oh, so glorious they were, the great souls, the great souls. And particularly in modern times, it's very hard to look among us and recognize that there is any great souls present. The tendency is, it's always the ones before. Of course, when a generation passes, the new generation may look to the last generation and say, yes, this devotee or this acharya, he was a great, he was self-realized, he descended from the spiritual world, he was Shakti avatar, or so many things. And looking around in the present, no one seems to be able to recognize much of anything other than fighting. Everyone is fighting, right? All right, but we'll all agree in the past, such great personalities appeared that what they wrote was not their own. What they spoke was not their own. It was coming through them from the higher plane, inspired or directly even God himself speaking through his devotee. To such a point that the devotee speaking is conscious that I'm not even aware of what I am speaking. It is not mine. It is coming through me. We had that. We quoted that incident of Srila Bhakti-siddhanta when he was speaking about the nature of satya, eternity, and such a description began to flow that he himself could not recognize it. This is not my own. I am not yet the receiver of this, but yet it is being given to those in front of me through me. And he gestured for Sridhara Maharaj, please write this down so I can examine after it's over. Wow. What did I say the other day? Welcome to the mysticism of Bhakti Yoga. It is not simply rules, regulation, up at 4 o'clock, and learn a few verses and that's Krishna consciousness. No, it is not without its mysticism. All right, so aside from my interruption there, Goswami, please continue.
No apology needed. Just as a parrot speaks something when inspired by another agent, it is like that. My pronunciation is a parrot's pronunciation. Someone is at the back. Eternal knowledge comes down in this atmosphere in such a way, through some channel or other. Revealed truth means that. Revealed truth means that it is eternal in the world of ideas and thought. And that is coming here only through something, some medium. So we have to consider, seeing the nature of the truth, that this is of a revealed characteristic and not of empirical research. Then we can detect this. This should be run to. This should be run to as revealed truth. And this is reactive of the intellect here. The revealed truth generally comes through some medium, a rishi, not a creator, but they are a seer, and they are a medium, and they are giving here. They are passing. Passage from nirguna. It is coming. It is inspiring him and coming out. In this way, that is the nature of a revealed truth. Bhaktivinoda Thakura has written Jaiva Dharma. That is also in some kalpa or other. That is also in some kalpa or other. It was an actual fact here. It may be. It is coming through him.
So this is the main point. Here we first recognize that the eternal plane of truth, the eternal plane of knowledge, that these things are coming to us in this world. They may not all come at once. They may not all come within our lifetime. Certainly they may all not come at any particular time or even in any particular kalpa or millennium. But I think everyone can catch that idea, and especially if we reflect back to a simpler explanation that the Vedas, I believe the word is aparusya. Apurusheya, and it means eternally existing. So that is what Srila Sridhara Maharaj is talking about. So, of course, we have 4 Vedas, we have Puranas, and this is what we have now. But within those are books that are mentioned that we don't have anymore. Remember in our research, when we were having a gentleman's quarrel with the Madhva Sampradaya years ago, they were saying, you quote at least, I think they were saying like 20 books to support that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is an avatar of Krishna, but we don't find any of those books existing. Remember that, Gary?
Yep.
There was something like 20, 24 books quoted by the Gaudiya Vaiṣṇava Acharyas, both present and past, means, between now and back to the time of Mahaprabhu, and those books aren't available. Well, when we did our research and we found out that Madhvacharya, he quotes 200 different shastras to support his statements in his Vedanta commentary and other commentaries on Gita and everything. We came up with a list of 200 books, and you cannot find those books anywhere in the world today. They might be stuck in some library, but no one can find them. No one's got them. They're not out there. Over 200 books. And it also happens to be, on the mystical side of Bhakti Yoga, that book that he quotes from, that doesn't necessarily have to be in his library or his friend's library or some temple library, and he borrows it and thumbs through and finds a quote that he wants to use, and okay, there was the book. The higher chances are that Madhva's bringing these quotes to support his philosophy. He's bringing them down from this eternal plane. You follow me?
Yes.
Because it's highly unlikely that there were 200 books and he had all of them, and then they've all just kind of disappeared, and there's no pages that we can thumb through today. So, of course, scholars and others, they scoff at this idea. They dismiss this idea. Scholars are almost, no offense to any Vaishnava scholars out there, but most scholars, they're almost condemned to their scholarship because it just becomes so mundane. The proof, they have to see the proof. They cannot perceive the substance, and they lack faith. Knowledge is required, bhakti jnana is required, but we have seen many times, and we will read a statement here, where knowledge, jnana, well, first off, we know it's a lower stage of bhakti, called jnana sunya bhakti. Your bhakti, your knowledge, your everything based on your on jnana, knowledge. It's a lower stage, the higher stage being called jnana sunya bhakti, purified, free from the dependence on knowledge. So knowledge is required. It's a great thing. But we've seen many times, historically, both in the present time, in the time of Srila Prabhupada, and going back in history to even amongst this people who themselves had the darshan of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, like Ballabhacharya, and after him, like who was the head of the Ativadi, Rupakavi Raj.
Jagannath Das, yeah.
Jagannath Das. And others became puffed up because of their knowledge and thought that they knew better than their own guru or their param guru, or even, thought they knew better than the original commentators of Bhagavatam. Particularly, that's the case of Ballabhacharya, who thought he knew better than Sridhara Swami, the original commentator. And he approached Mahaprabhu and said, "Oh, please read my commentary. It's so much better than Sridhar Swami's commentary," referring to the original Bhagavatam commentator. So this is a fact. And how does this happen? Are these people born that way? Well, it could be their nature, but more times than not, it's due to their acquired knowledge, or perceived as such knowledge. Knowledge without humility is a defect. And this seems to be a problem. So we have a quote from Srila Prabhupada about that. Let me just jump ahead and read that one right now. May I got that marked here in my paper here. Oh, no, it's not in my paper. It's in my phone. Hang on a second. Where's my phone? Here's a short quote by His Divine Grace. And where the heck is that? And where is that? Okay. This is from a letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote to Dikshit. I don't know who that is. Anybody recall? What they're saying?
No.
Dikshit.
I saw the name, and I was
wondering. It doesn't say
Dikshit
Das, but I think it may have been, okay, another speculation, who it was. We'll try to find out. But it's dated September 18th, 1976. So very, very, very current for the time. I mean, it's in the last year or so of the Leela manifest pastimes of His Divine Grace. So here's the excerpt from that letter, and it's not taken out of context, or we're not trying to bend what His Divine Grace is saying. He's simply saying, I am practically seeing that as soon as they, our students, begin to learn a little Sanskrit, they immediately feel they have become more than their guru. Then the policy is to kill their guru and become guru themselves. End of quote. So there's no bending that one. That's just kind of spells it out. And I know exactly who he's thinking about. We're not going to mention names. But by 1976, Srila Prabhupada had seen at least, I'm remembering, 3 prominent devotees of Srila Prabhupada who, due to their Sanskrit learning, began to think that they had a more accurate and true understanding than their guru, than His Divine Grace. And these 3 individuals, which I'm thinking of, I'm not going to mention their names, and those of you who know a little bit of the histories may know well who I'm talking about, they turned against Srila Prabhupada in a vicious manner and remained in that state of vicious consciousness against their guru to this present day. Some of them even having dedicated articles and even complete websites to trying to undermine their spiritual master. But today, of course, Prabhupada is not their spiritual master, but once upon a time he was. And these were not just devotees from nowhere. They were people, all of them, who had personal association of His Divine Grace. But when they began to take up their study of Sanskrit, they got into many things and eventually got into thinking they knew more than Prabhupada did, and then ended up connecting themselves to other people who were the enemies of Bhakti-siddhanta and Bhaktivinoda and so forth and so on. So that's what Srila Prabhupada is talking about there. They get a little bit of knowledge, a little bit of Sanskrit, and they think they're top dog now.
Dikshit is an Indian disciple of Srila Prabhupada.
Oh, okay.
So should we conclude that we shouldn't study Sanskrit?
No.
I mean, Prabhupada's words are eternal and absolute. So
yes, and it says that he's wasn't it? No. Then you're taking things out of context. Where'd that quote go? Oh, it's back on my phone over here. Okay. I practically assume that seeing that as soon as they are students, well, it's not all students, and I know a number of Prabhupada disciples and second generation devotees. They have become very educated, you can say, in Sanskrit, and they do a tremendous service with their learning. So, but it's like, oh, people die driving cars, so should we stop the traveling Sankirtan parties because people die driving cars? No. Buckle up, 2 hands on the wheel, don't drive late at night, stay alert, and be cautious, because the danger is out there. So the danger, padam yad padam natesham, the danger is at every step, and that's not just talking about crossing the street during rush hour in LA. That's probably more referring to the spiritual dangers that are out there. I remember Srila Puri Maharaj saying, quoting, what is the Sanskrit, Giri, for following the footsteps? Satovrati, or what is that?
Satovrate, yeah.
Satovrate, following the footsteps. And Srila Puri Maharaj said, no, not like that. And he leaned forward and he said, follow very exactly in the footsteps. You see. Not just kind of in behind, just kind of coming along the same path. No. It's like when something is most dangerous, like when they climb Everest, a lot of times in the last ascent, each person is stepping exactly in the footprint of the person in front of them, because it's death on either side. You know, very, very dangerous. So Sanskrit is desirable, although it is not mandatory. But it is desirable. but student beware. All right, so, okay, you read up to, where did you stop reading, Goswami?
We're on the next part underneath the line there, from subjective evolution of consciousness.
Just as a parrot? No.
No, I already
Okay,
read that.
Giri, I wanted you to read that section which is printed in the book, Subjective Evolution of Consciousness. So we're continuing to hear from Srila Sridhara Maharaj, and now we're going to read a short excerpt from the book, Subjective Evolution of Consciousness, part of which was just read from a transcribe. So those of you who don't know, most of these books, in fact, almost all of these books of Srila Sridhar Maharaj are compiled by his disciples and his followers from the extensive, I don't know how many hours we have, Giri, recordings of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. Because I remember there used to be 400 tapes. They were 2 hours each, and then there was more tapes. So roughly say there were like 500 tapes of 2 hours each recorded between 1979, actually, when Pradumna first went. Actually before that, 78 Gaur Purnima meeting, the tapes of the GBC with Srila Sridhar Maharaj, stating that Srila Prabhupada told us if we have any questions, we should come to your divine grace, his god brother Swami B.R. Sridhar Maharaj of Navadvip. That is the opening statement. I think that's in 78 Gaur Purnima time. So from then until 1988, we have a collection of about 1,000 hours of recorded conversation with His Divine Grace. And we're happy to say we have digitized, I think, not all of it, but we're way up in the higher 90% bracket of digitizing that. In addition to that, we have over 100 hours of video. Now, some of the times the video and the transcribe are the same, but there's a few instances where they are not. And then, like in all cases, there are times when Srila Sridhar Maharaj spoke and someone was there to listen or to ask, and it was not recorded. And there's always the fact and that things were lost and all that. But we're very happy that we have over 1,000 hours of darshan with His Divine Grace. And many quintessential subjects are covered here in those conversations. And it's from these conversations that Sri Guru and His Grace, Subjective Evolution of Consciousness, Golden Volcano, Search for Sri Krishna Reality, The Beautiful, Loving Search for the Lost Servant, Guardians of Devotion 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, all these books and others, they're all derived from these tapes, transcribes, etc. All right, so Giri, please read from that section. You've got it there, from Subjective Evolution of Consciousness.
So Srila Maharaj begins. He says, when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was in Puri during his last days, and an eclipse came, one devotee who was supposed to know Siddhanta, the conclusions of scripture, was sitting next to Prabhupada. Prabhupada means Bhaktisiddhanta. He suddenly ridiculed the idea given in the Bhagavatam that during a solar or lunar eclipse, Rahu devours the sun or moon. I could not tolerate that such a remark should be passed in regard to the Bhagavatam, and argued that what Srimad Bhagavatam has stated is not to be taken lightly. I offered what seemed like some far-fetched support. I said that in his Jaiva Dharma, Bhaktivinoda Thakura has created so many characters, but I think that they are not imaginary. What he has written might have occurred during some other millennium, Kalpa, or day of Brahma, and that has now come to the surface. In this way, I went on to support the cosmological position of the Bhagavatam by arguing that what is necessary to prove reality must also have some real position. It cannot but be. In this way, my argument went, and Prabhupada supported me.
Yeah. So I'm surprised that even some people that I know, well, actually a few, that should have by now read Subjective Evolution of Consciousness. I mean, that statement is printed right here in the book. It's not like, oh, it's a secret conversation. And Sridhar Maharaj is giving the example of Bhaktivinoda and the Jaiva Dharma, as this is not imaginary. Characters, what to speak of the philosophy, even the incidences are not imaginary, that this has happened in some previous kalpa. So I once suggested to somebody, I said, yes, today we have this book called Jaiva Dharma, but 1,000 years from now, or 2,000, or in another kalpa, somebody might be holding up an Upanishad called Jaiva Dharma. And what does that mean? Well, what are the Upanishads? The Upanishads are conversations between rishis and others and things that are spoken in some previous kalpas. So you move ahead a few kalpas, and this Jaiva Dharma, it might not appear exactly as I'm holding that book, etc., but a portion of that Jaiva Dharma or some part of it may appear, and the readers at that time, in a kalpa into the future or so, may be reading that as an Upanishad. And it may appear in their kalpa as a printed literature which Vyasa himself writes down. What is Vyasa? He's a literary incarnation. There hasn't been one, there have been many, there will be many more, and particularly in other kalpas. And what will they do? They will be inspired, this will flow through them, and what is ordained by the Supreme Lord, they will write. And they may have different Puranas than we have today. They may have some of the same, they may have different ones, same Upanishads, some different Upanishads. It is not like, oh, that's all the Upanishads there are. There's 108 in eternity. No, that's what we have at present. So, I think that's very clear. Now, just to reflect for a minute, Bhagavatam, Rahu, devouring the moon, and in the transcribe where this is taken from, Sridhar Maharaj informs us who that should have known very learned devotee was. I'm not going to say who it was, but he was ridiculing the idea that, what is this? Everybody knows it's a shadow. It's not Rahu. Well, you go right through the Bhagavatam, especially 5th canto. Oh, you got trees, and you got dweeps, and you got fruits as big as elephants, and rivers running with mango juice, and it's just like, wahoo! You got 4 elephants holding up the world. The description is, I don't know what you call it. It's a description of a flat Earth, basically, and it's got all the different dweeps, and then it's got the mountains around the edge and everything. And this is another flat Earth talk for the future, but Bhagavatam is saying these things, and inverted mountain called Meru, and all of this stuff, you see. But the chances on you seeing any of that, as per the description, are basically nil. Let me put it in this context. You look out into the sky, what do you see? You see stars, you see the moon. If you're in a nice place in the Himalayas or here in Mexico up in the mountains, you can see the Milky Way. If you know what you're looking at, you can spot the various planets. Hey, if you've got a telescope, it's not like all telescopes are false. You look through the telescope, you see the craters of the moon. It depends. I looked through once the Mount Palomar telescope. That's out of San Diego, out in the mountains. It used to be one of the biggest, most powerful and the time I looked through it and actually put my eye down on the thing, and it wasn't like they had a piece of paper up there on the lens to foobar us all, And when you look out there, no elephants, no inverted mountain, no nada. And no universal form either. No Virata Rupa. All of a sudden, Arjuna saw. He's looking in the sky 1 minute, and it's going, yeah, there's the sun, right? There's some clouds over there. And the next minute, he's seeing another, what I sometimes refer to as a dimension. He's being given this divine vision. And he said, is that not real? Is that not real? All that he saw, the Virata Rupa? No, it's right there every day. The Virata Rupa is right there. But who has the eyes to see that? So similarly, these descriptions in Srimad Bhagavatam, everything, Rahu, everything. And what Sridhar Maharaj mentions is personality. All of a sudden, we go from the world of shadows and planets and craters and clusters and gases in the universe and gravity and all this stuff. All of a sudden, we get the conscious vision of the world. And if we write that down on a piece of paper, guess what? It's very different to the world we see. But you trying to prove that to the world, that there are 4 elephants holding up the earth and all these kind of things, it's going to be pretty hard. In fact, give it up. It ain't going to happen. And if you go about it in the wrong way by presenting flat earth theory, you're going to make, without explaining the conscious vision of the world as opposed to the Mayic vision of the world. If you don't explain this, and you just try to come out and say, no, the world is flat, they're fooling us, they don't want us to go down to the South Pole, because we'll find out that the world is dropping off into space, it's a flat disk and everything, then you're going down in history as a kook. Substance over form. If you're going to go that direction, then you have to explain what is very difficult to explain. Very difficult to explain, and that's the conscious vision. You can sometimes, I guess, maybe legitimately use dimensional vision. And that these things cannot be seen with the naked eye. They cannot be proven with the instruments produced by the body, which is got a material intelligence, material mind, material sight, material smell, material touch, and all these cannot be proved, you see. Nor, well, they cannot really be disproved, but the eye will never see that. So it's almost like a parallel universe thing. Both things are existing, you see. But what should you be focusing on to prove to the world? That the world is flat? You're up against the wall. Forget it. It's not going to be provable because it can't be discovered with the mundane senses. That is a conscious vision, just like the universal form. And it's not something you can discover. It was something that was given to Arjuna. Behold, Arjuna, my universal form. So if Krishna wants to say, behold, scientists, the 4 elephants that lift up the world, whoa, right? But don't bet on that happening anytime soon. So flat earthers out there might want to reconsider what you're doing there at Mayapur. Anyway, that's a separate conversation someday.
The flat tards, yeah.
The flat tards, yeah. We'll get you sooner or later. Okay, what was next?
The Jaiva Dharma itself.
Goswami, then that next quote, I think I marked it there. Statements from the Jaiva Dharma. Okay, so here we're going to get into, first we've said, Jaiva Dharma is not a novel, it's not a fiction, it's not imaginary, it's part of the eternal truth. It's part of the eternal, absolute truth, and it has come here through Bhaktivinoda. Now I mentioned some people are saying that the whole thing is a novel, some people are saying, well, it's a great little story, it's a novel, plus the philosophy isn't even true. And there are many smaller issues, but the 2 biggest ones are the origin of the jiva, Tatastha-shakti, and all of that. And a smaller issue, it's definitely smaller because it's not that widespread, but it's equally important. It's known as the anadi-karma. So, Goswami, go ahead and read a few things there. There's actually quite a bit in this section, so let's go. I think the reading was good up till now. I think our viewers can stick with it. What do you think? I was enlivened by it.
Yes, very good.
All right, continue then.
Okay. This is the conversation continues in Jaiva Dharma between different personalities. The borderline between water and land is called tata. Yet the water is contiguous to the land. Where then is the tata, the margin? The tata is merely the demarcation that separates the water from the land. This tata is a very subtle state. It cannot be perceived through mundane vision. From this allegory, we take the water as the spiritual world and the land as the material world. Thus, the fine line that divides the 2 worlds is the tata, the subtle demarcation exactly whereupon the jiva soul is located. The countless atomic particles that float in the rays of the sun give an inkling of the real position of the jiva. In one direction, the jiva sees the spiritual universe, and in the other, he sees the phenomenal world created by Lord Brahma, the world of Maya. The Chit-shakti of the Supreme Lord is unlimited, and the Maya Shakti is enormous. Positioned exactly between the two are the innumerable jivas. They are the product of Sri Krishna's Tatastha-shakti, and hence, by nature, the jiva is marginal.
I want to mention at this time that there are many discussions about the origin of the jiva throughout the present Vedic literature that we have, apart from Jaiva Dharma. However, and there are many commentaries by previous acharyas, particularly in other sampradayas like Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, very very prominent acharyas of other Madhva Sampradaya and Sri Sampradaya, etc. And they do go into, there is some discussion in all of them, by all of them, in all those sampradayas, about the jivas, the living entities, and also, we'll get into it here in just a minute, the anadi. However, nowhere, anywhere, and even in our sampradaya, and that would include people like Jiva Goswami and Bhaktivinoda Thakura. So in the history of Vaishnavacharyas in any sampradaya or in our own sampradaya, no one has gone into such detail of the origin of the living entities and their conditioning being anadi. None of them have gone into the great detail which we find Bhaktivinoda Thakura revealing in the Jaiva Dharma. He has revealed in greater detail the subject of the origin of consciousness, the individual consciousness, the living entity, in greater detail than any previous acharya at any time, anywhere in our known history. But some people have chose to just dismiss what Bhaktivinoda says, and not considering him to be giving us something from the eternal plane. In other words, they think it's already been given, it's already in our old books, it's already been given. But probably if you go back, well, you do, you go back to the time of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the six Goswamis, and everyone was arguing, it's already been given. We have Chaitanya Charitamrita, and we accept that as a revealed scripture. But in the time of it being written, there were so many people that didn't accept that. So that, again, that tendency, to just rely only on our old books. Bhaktivinoda mentions that the old books of our country, the old religious books, and not being in tune, in touch with the living conception, and that these rishis will hopefully continue to appear and will give us revelation when the Lord so desires it. All right, please, back to the reading.
Mm-hmm. So this conversation between Vrajanath, the disciple, and Raghunath Das Babaji, the guru, continues. Vrajanath, what is the Tatastha Swabhava, marginal nature? Raghunath Das Babaji. The jiva is situated in the middle with access to both worlds, and he is constitutionally susceptible to come under the control of either of the Shaktis. This condition is symptomatic of the Tatastha Swabhava. When the movement of river water shifts the bank of a river, this seizes the land and converts it into a riverbed. Alternatively, silt may deposit into embankments, which then gradually becomes land. Similarly, if the jiva looks towards Sri Krishna, his faith in Krishna increases, and he develops a stronger foothold in the spiritual realm. However, if he looks at Maya and turns his back to Sri Krishna, he thereby becomes enmeshed in the network of Maya. This choice is the natural characteristic of the Tatastha Swabhava. Brajanath continues, O Master, why did some souls leave the borderline of matter and spirit and enter the world of Maya? Why did other souls go to the spiritual world?
Okay, read that question again. That's a very important question. That comes to a big conversation. We're going to cover that briefly here. Very important question. Please read that again.
O Master, why did some souls leave the borderline of matter and spirit and enter the world of Maya? And why did other souls go to the spiritual world? Babaji replies, Lord Krishna's own qualities are present in a very small degree in the individual spirit souls. Because Lord Krishna has free will, so the individual souls eternally possess a small quantity of free will also. When that free will is used properly, the individual soul is favorable to Krishna and turns towards him. When the free will is misused, the soul is averse to Krishna and turns away from him. Then the soul tries to enjoy Maya. Puffed up with petty pride, the soul thinks, I am the enjoyer of matter. Then the pure spiritual form of the soul becomes covered by the 5 kinds of ignorance that begin with illusion and false ego. Thus is the proper and improper use of free will that will bring us either liberation or imprisonment in the material world.
So that's, I think this is one of the key points of information here, is it is to do with the free choice, free will of the living entity. That the living entity in the marginal position chooses the direction towards Maya or the direction towards Krishna. So there are discussions about free will. What is the necessity of free will? So I'm going to jump ahead here. I had something to read there, but let me see if I can go ahead to this. Where is that? No. Darn it. This one makes some. Oh, okay, Giri. Up that the part on the anadi and the jiva that's there. It's under the title Anadi and Jiva. Srila Maharaj transcript not found. You have that?
Yeah. Yes, I have it.
Okay. Put your head back in the screen there. You're popping out the screen there.
So Srila Maharaj says, everything in its innate nature has got a real connection with the Lord. So the inner thing is more important than the outer impressions. So that must be given preference. We must be thinking in that way. Then we can find that this is temporary, this Maya existence, though it is told anadi. Anadi means before it enters this world of mundane thinking. The primal stage of conscious existence. So though it is told as anadi, but still it has got adi in the spiritual record. And in that phase, if we conceive of the highest harmony, then we can look on them as, this is temporary, like in a dream. This life is like a dream to me. This is the absolute conception of the inner conscience of the soul. And when dream is gone, and he again sees himself awake in his previous function of service to the Lord. Then the student asks, devotee asks, if in the marginal position, tatastha, the soul has exposure to both reality and illusion, why doesn't he have enough discrimination to come to the right path?
So I've seen this inquiry come up before, not just here, but in just the dealings between devotees in general, here, there, and everywhere, and over a long period of time. And basically, it is that, well, if we have our free will, Krishna gives us free will to make our choice to move towards the Mayak world or to move towards the Krishna world, the conscious world, the spiritual world. Why didn't Krishna just give us perfect discrimination so that all jivas in the tatastha, they will just automatically make the right decision. And so what is the need of this world? Then there would be no need of this world and all this. So that is answered in one way here by Srila Maharaj and he's going to explain how if the living entities had perfect discrimination, this would create a type of compulsion amongst the living entities, and compulsion itself interferes with free will. You see. And we could give many examples of that. Let's just look at a silly one. There's 10 people in a room and 9 people are ordering chocolate ice cream. What are you going to order? Pistachio? In all probability, you go, yeah, I'll just have what everybody else is having. That's called compulsion. Why are hairstyles popular? Why are clothing popular? What does that mean, popular? It means falling into the compulsion what everybody else is doing. And when that compulsion is pressed, then your free will is being treaded upon. You do not have complete free will, and love, which is the ultimate goal, love of Krishna, cannot be forced. It is not something that can be forced. It is the ultimate expression of one's free will to fall in love with Krishna. So in that way, he explains that. Another explanation we're not going to get into here, which I did read in the Jaiva Dharma, had to do with fulfilling the various desires of Krishna, which include all desires, and that is to be the protector of the living entities. And you see, then some of them may say, oh, but Krishna kills many demons protecting the devotees. But dearie, that only happens in the material world. There are no demons killed in Goloka Vrindavan in the spiritual world. There are many things that are not there. There are no wives to steal. Krishna doesn't steal the wives of the gopas there. There are no demons, particularly there are no demons to kill. Demons cannot enter the spiritual world, just as envy, hatred, all these things only can exist in the Mahatattva. So in order to kill demons, there has to be a material world. And Bhaktivinoda in the Jaiva Dharma, we find a elaborate explanation of that. Maybe that's a good topic for another day, killing demons. But it's related to this, why we have imperfect discrimination. All right, so Gary, now please read Srila Sridhara Maharaj's reply.
Well, Srila Maharaj replies, he has no real depth of discrimination, only a little discrimination, but it is there. However small it may be, it is there. Then the devotee asks, can he also go to the spiritual domain of the Lord? And Srila Maharaj replies, yes, and some souls do go to that side. Some go to that side and some come to this side. The soul has independence. Not all come to one side or the other. Then there will be some compulsion. But there is no compulsion. It is free choice. Some are coming to this side and some are going to that side.
Okay, a very interesting point there. Again, the compulsion. Imperfect discrimination eliminates the fact of a compulsion developing. And another thing which he said in the paragraphs above was, though the living entities entering the material world has been described as anadi, he's saying there is some adi. Anadi means without beginning, but adi means beginning or original. So in the spiritual record, he says there is some adi. And that is also explained more extensively in Jaiva Dharma. So for those who are unaware, there are some contemporary Vaishnavas who have fallen upon the idea that Bhaktivinoda just invented all this elaborate description of free will, and that Sridhar Maharaj is just supporting party line, and that he's just giving support to all of that. And in such a deep way, he's giving support to that, to even explain to us how perfect discrimination in this false philosophy would create compulsion, and how compulsion would actually ultimately interferes with love and all these things. So, but they say that it's all false, and that the living entities always have been in this material world. They were never anywhere else. They were not in a Leela and came here. They were simply here. And, of course, they're not alone. This thinking hasn't come from nowhere. We found out that there are different branches of Buddhist, the Jain Buddhist in India. They follow a similar conception. Madhvites, also a similar conception. Ramanujas and others, they have not explained in any depth what it means, this word anadi, the anadi-karma of the living entities. And in other places in Jaiva Dharma, Bhaktivinoda explains that it begins before time began. The conditioning, it begins. The adi begins before time, before the element of time begins. So it is unrecorded, and therefore it is from beyond the universe where it begins. So like I was saying, this is the book Jaiva Dharma in the greatest detail. Very hard to just recall everything there to memory, but the gist of it is, no, we have not always just been in this material world. We have a spiritual origin. Now, you sent me this morning, Giri Maharaj, a quote from Srila Prabhupada, which is derived from, actually it's from a GBC resolution number 79, compiled in 1995. And when you said this, I was pretty surprised. Would you go ahead and read that to us?
Sure. So yeah, this is from 1995, and the resolution reads so: Vaikuntha is that place in which no one ever falls down. The living entity belongs to Lord Krishna's marginal potency, Tatastha-shakti. On this, we all agree.
Okay, stop. Got it? On this, we all agree. The living entity is Tatastha-shakti, marginal energy, and no one falls from Vaikuntha. Right? Now, I was very happy to read that. Please continue.
The origin of the conditioned life of the souls now in this material world is undoubtedly beyond the range of our direct perception. We can therefore best answer questions about that origin by repeating the answers Srila Prabhupada gave when such questions were asked of him.
Now,
quote,
wait, before you read the quote, again, Vaikuntha is that place from which no one ever falls down. Vaikuntha means the spiritual world. Vaikuntha also includes Goloka. Goloka is the highest realm within Vaikuntha. It means the spiritual abodes of Krishna, Vaikuntha. The Brahmajyoti is not called Vaikuntha. It has its own categorical place. And I'm going to get back to that in just a moment. So, it is resolved in this resolution. Let us simply answer the question, where do we come from, by quoting Srila Prabhupada. And they give here one of the best, I think one of the best quotes that really kind of packs it in there very concisely by His divine grace, as per the origin of the jiva.
So this quote is from Srimad Bhagavatam, purport 428.54. Srila Prabhupada writes, the original home of the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, both the Lord and the living entities live together very peacefully. Since the living entity remains engaged in the service of the Lord, they both share a blissful life in the spiritual world. However, when the living entity, misusing his tiny independence, wants to enjoy himself, he falls down into the material world. End quote.
So that sounds all very good. That sounds good. What does it sound like? It sounds like that, well, the eternal living entities who are eternally living with Krishna. You know how long eternity is? That means since forever and beyond. All of a sudden says that they become envious. Right? Did it say envy? No, misusing their tiny independence. They want to enjoy, and they fall down. But wait a minute. They just began the resolution by saying, Vaikuntha is that place from which no one ever falls down. Now Prabhupada is saying, one, it's the original home of living entities and Krishna. And that some living entities misuse their independence and they fall down. So one then naturally thinks, oh, well, that means a cowherd boy or a gopi or, I don't know, one of Mother Yasoda's friends or Nanda Maharaja's relatives all of a sudden becomes envious of Krishna, or somebody in the Vaikuntha court of Lord Narayan on a Vaikuntha planet. They become envious of the opulence of the Lord, and therefore they fall down. So this resolution has a whammo head-to-head contradiction. No one falls. We all agree upon that. Next quote, by misuse of independence, one falls. So and if you say, that's it, that's all that you quote, well, guess what? That leaves a lot of people hanging, and I'm not inventing this. So sometimes I'll invent my own questions to write an article because I know the thought's out there. But I'm telling you, this leaves people hanging. People are not stupid. And nowadays, I think people tend to want to scrutinize and study deeply many of the things Prabhupada said, more so than the first generation of devotees who just kind of take it for granted that they're Prabhupada's disciples and they're chanting 16 rounds a day and they're following the 48 principles and everything's good. Well, this other generation, they're like being asked, well, they've seen gurus fall down a lot of things, so they really look to Srila Prabhupada in some cases in a more like desperate way than the first generation does, you see. Not exclusively, but it happens that way. And when they do, they see apparent contradictions. Srila Prabhupada himself is saying in the Srimad Bhagavatam in the chapter of Jaya Vijay, conclusion is, no one falls. Here he's saying misuse of independence. So what do we, the disciples and followers of Prabhupada, have to do? Just make these quotes? That's it. Figure it out yourself. Here's the quote. Prabhupada said, here's the quote. Sridhara Maharaj, we read something here, was very subtle just a minute ago. I've lost the place. And he was saying that we have to go deep into these subjects. We have to maintain a certain discretion here. So I think this statement of Srila Prabhupada begs some clarification because it's contradictory to the very beginning of the resolution, which says we all agree no one falls from Vaikuntha. Well, if you don't fall from Vaikuntha, you sure the heck don't fall from Goloka.
Well, that's also a contradiction of what Prabhupada said in the Jai Vijay episode, where he said nobody falls in the spiritual world.
Yeah, but then he's saying some living entities. So where are those living entities in the spiritual world? Brahmano hi pratishtaham. Krishna says, I am the source of the Brahman, which is the source of all living entities. And this Tatastha-shakti and other places, writings of Bhaktivinoda, Bhakti-siddhanta, and Sridhara Maharaj, this Tatastha-shakti is also described as being the Brahma-jyoti.
I just wanted to mention something which goes under the radar a lot with general devotees, and that's Srila Prabhupada himself in Ishopanishad says this. There's a very short quote here. He says, the all-pervading feature of the Lord, which exists in all circumstances of waking and sleeping as well as in potential states, in which the Jiva Shakti, living force, is generated as both conditioned and liberated souls, is known as Brahman.
Yeah, there you go. So it's in this Brahman state, this non-descript of the individuality, what it's called, the homogeneous plane of non-differentiated self. Mm-hmm. And Sridhar Maharaj was one day saying that self arises, and at this point, then it's like a child coming out of the womb on its own. Not it's on its own. It's prompted by something. That's another discussion, what prompts these things. But and then it moves in one direction or the other. It doesn't have a clear idea where it's going, but it's going. And it enters the material world or the spiritual world. So, but where is this Brahma-jyoti? It's in the spiritual world. It emanates from the body of Krishna. Now, there's other descriptions about different living entities And they all don't come from the same Adi Bhagavan, Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is with Radharani. Some of them spring from Balaram. Some of them spring from Radharani herself. But in general, the living entities, particularly that we found in this material world, their first level understanding is they emanate from Tatastha, and the Brahman is the Tatastha, and the Brahman is, well, technically, in the spiritual world. In the example, water and earth, the Tatastha is in the water, in the earth, but actually it's made of the earth. Its substance is of the earth, but it is sometimes in the water, under the influence of water, Maya, and it is sometimes in the dry, under the influence of the sun, of Krishna, in the spiritual world, and it can go in either place. But Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, once having returned to the supreme abode, one never returns. Once having gone to the supreme abode, gone, not returned. Once having gone to the supreme abode, one never returns to this material world. You see? So that would then give, if any living being in Leela of Krishna, Vaikuntha, Narayan Leela, or Krishna Cowherd Boy, Gopa Leela, if it's possible, somewhere, someday, in eternity, to misuse your little tiny independence and fall down to this world, well, those who have done it once, they're good to go forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, forever in eternity, because Krishna says, once you come to my abode, you do not go back to the material world. So it should be understood that once you go to that abode, however you got there, a Mukta Jiva from the very beginning, or a Bada Jiva who achieved the status of a Mukta Jiva. There's Siddha Mukta Jiva, the eternally liberated associates who are never in the material world. There are the liberated Jivas who were in the material world. But however you came there, you cannot go back to this material world. It's not that, well, if you came there originally as a Mukta Jiva, you could fall down, and once you come back again, you're good to go. You can never fall and never go back, like Krishna says. No, however you're there. No one from the spiritual world. And you bring this home to many devotees, and you say, could Srila Prabhupada fall down? They go, no. Never, never, ever. Never, never, ever, never, never, never. In all eternity. Well, you're correct. But neither can anybody else in the spiritual world. It's not like, well, there's some devotees up there, they're not as great as Prabhupada, Maybe they could fall down. And how many there are, hundreds of millions of billions of quadrillions of trillions of billions of quadrillions. We can say numbers all day long and not even touch, think, a fraction of how many are there. And you can count living entities till the cows come home and beyond forever in this world. Just try to count the ants in the neighborhood where you live out there in the world. Just the ants. Then think the ants of the country. Then think the ants of the planet. Then think of the other living entities and how many living entities there are. And they were all pure devotees of Krishna. They were all in the Leela of Krishna for eternity. And one day they misused their little bitty independence, and Krishna kicked them out, and here they are in the material world for you to step on while you're walking down the sidewalk. If that's true, the spiritual world's got serious problems.
Well, it means the spiritual world has envy, which is a product of Maya. So how is that possible?
Yeah, envy. And Prabhupada is not saying, and most of the time they say, why are you in this material world, devotees? Because you were envious of Krishna. They'll say, because we became, in fact, even in that book, the Oops book, we call the Oops book, produced by the GBC, Our Original Position, they state envy. Envy. Prabhupada is not saying envy, he's saying misuse of independence. Well, where does that misuse of independence occur? It occurs in the Tatastha, which is also the Brahman, and it's there that occurs, and then one can go to the side of the material world. And proper use, or good luck on that, and the ones that choose and go directly to the spiritual world, others to the material world. Not envy. If you study Sankhya philosophy, which is there in Bhagavatam, I forget the canto it's in.
Third canto.
Third canto, you find out that envy is only existing in the Mahatattva. which is that great cloud of Maya. Envy does not exist in the spiritual world. Of course, there is the story one day how Madhu Mangal, the famous Madhu Mangal, he became envious of Krishna's lunch. You know that story? Madhu Mangal especially likes ladus. And Krishna has always got a few ladus packed in his lunch. And the cowherd boys sit to have their lunch, and they share their lunch with each other. And sometimes Krishna will throw a ladu, and Madhu Mangal will catch it in his mouth. And he amuses Krishna by putting his hand under his arm and making a sound like some kind of sound, some kind of farting sound. He makes that sound. Krishna laughs and gives him a ladu. Well, one day Krishna refused to give him a ladu. And Madhu Mangal said to Krishna, well, you just have lots of ladus because the gopis and Mother Yasoda, they're just impressed by the way you dress. You know, if I had the kind of clothes that you have, I could very easily get more ladus myself. So Krishna says, okay, well, here you go. And Krishna changed dress with Madhu Mangal. He gave him his yellow dhoti, he gave him his flute, his vamsi, he gave him his peacock feather and various ornaments. And Madhu Mangal thought, all right, this is my day, my ship's come home. And he's headed to the village, to the Vrindavan, to go and get ladus from all the people, the ladies in the village. All right, you follow me up to here?
Yeah.
At that same time, in Mathura, Kamsa was meeting with the Keshi demon. I believe, yes, Keshi demon. And telling the Keshi demon to go to Vrindavan to kill Krishna. And when so the Keshi asked, how will I identify this boy Krishna? I said, well, he's dark in complexion, he's wearing a yellow dhoti, he's got a peacock feather, and he described the flute, the peacock feather, and the dress of Krishna. So the Keshi demon then takes the form of a big ass, a big horse, and comes charging into Vrindavan. Who does he see? There's Gopakumar dressed in Krishna's clothes, headed for the village. Not Gopakumar, Madhu Mangal. Headed to the village to get some ladus from the ladies of the village. And then the Keshi charges, spins around, and kicks. Gives a hind leg kick at Madhu Mangal. Just the wind of the kick sends him flying back 30 or 40 meters, tumbling back, boom, into the dirt. And he just jumps up and runs back to where the cowherd boys are having lunch. And he takes the crown and the flute, takes off the dhoti, and he just throws it in front of Krishna and says, you can have it. I'm telling you, it's not worth it. Yeah. And Krishna gets dressed and goes out and kills the Keshi demon. So, yeah, that's an example of envy in the Leela of Krishna, you see. That's how it all ends up, you see. There is no envy in the spiritual world. There is no hate in the spiritual world. These things exist only in the Mahatattva. But if we don't look at things in detail, then we can very easily overlook these things. And I was surprised that some of these devotees would say, who have read Subjective Evolution of Consciousness, where Sridhar Maharaj clearly says that the anadi has its adi. And Bhaktivinoda more detail explains that is before time began. That is why it is called anadi. And it cannot be traced. So,
he calls that Chitkala. In Chaitanya Shikshamrita, he says there's material time and there's spiritual time.
Yes.
Our time here begins in material world, in material time, is it. Before that is Chitkala. Spiritual time.
Spiritual time. And in that spiritual time, no one falls from Leela. No one falls from their Siddha Deha as a cowherd boy, as a senior Gopa or Gopi, or as a Paramour Gopi, as an associate of Sri Radha. No one falls. And no one falls in Vaikuntha as a Yamadut, having achieved the four-arm form in the association in awe and reverence of Lord Narayan and the unlimited Vaikuntha planets. No one falls down from there. But those in the Tatastha misuse their independence. So simply to quote Srila Prabhupada and not give explanation where explanation is sometimes needed, like I made the example of, well, as Srila Prabhupada said, men had 64-ounce brains, women had 32-ounce brains. Well, instead of just trying to pretend that he didn't say it, well, he did say it and explained that, well, from the edge, science, he's quoting what in his time was a scientific fact, which was later disproved. But also one could argue, so what? Is size everything? I seen a little judo master kick the hell out of some big old, 280-pound bully. Some guy that weighed 150 pounds just pounded that bully into the ground. So size isn't everything. So what? That's something material. The average size of a man's bicep is bigger than the average size of a woman's bicep. Well, that's mundane. So what? There's many ways to explain these things when the necessity arises, or you can just say, no, Prabhupada said, you see. But I think this one is quite different than 32 64 ounces or anything like that. Size doesn't matter. It's quality that matters. So, but here, he's not saying something contradictory. But why has the GBC come to this conclusion that we all understand no one falls? Because they've looked at the previous acharyas and they've come to realize, yes, actually, no one falls. Even Prabhupada himself says, but if we're going to deal with this, we should give this statement of Prabhupada and let it rest. Well, that's fine for those who made that decision, but those who received that decision still have questions because it's contradictory. But
it's a question.
If you're not afraid of the controversy and you delve into it, it's not a contradiction at all. In fact, it's in the realm of Prabhupada gives the disciple, when necessary, there's something more to be said. One can defend and explain the words of his guru, not give false interpretation, but explain them according to Shastra, according to other statements that Prabhupada has made, etc. Yes, Prabhupada supports the GBC's conclusion. No one fell from Vaikuntha. Yet he says in this statement that someone does. So how to explain that? It's a contradiction. Therefore, you have to explain that about the Tatastha marginal plane, Brahma Jyoti, that this is part of the land. Part of the, also to a minute degree, part of the Tatastha-shakti. That's another subtle thing that Bhaktivinoda is explaining. Now, someone has suggested once years ago that Bhaktivinoda wrote the Jaiva Dharma, because, he was in a Christian, influenced world, under the Raj, the British, the Christian missionaries. He went to Christian schools. He's trying to explain this so that God is not blamed for our suffering, you see. God is not blamed for our suffering. But I just read the other day where Srila Maharaja is saying that Bhaktivinoda wrote the Jaiva Dharma specifically for the Bengali audience. So he's not compromising some philosophy because he's preaching to some Christians, you see. And then Srila Maharaja said, but Krishna Samhita, he wrote Krishna Samhita with the Western mind in view as his audience. So there'd be no need, an argument would be there'd be no need for Bhaktivinoda to compromise the Siddhanta when he's writing for the Bengali audience.
Well, the other point is if this isn't just the only book he mentions it in. He first starts talking about this a year before he wrote the Jaiva Dharma in 1882. He wrote Mahaprabhu Shiksha, where he gives the Dashamula, the 10 main points of Gaudiya Vaiṣṇava Siddhanta. Then he wrote the Jaiva Dharma. Then there's Tattva Vivek. Then his commentary on the Brahma Samhita. Then Chaitanya Shikshamrita. Then even in Gita Mala, one of his songbooks, he also brings this point out about the tatastha-jiva. So this isn't in just one place. It's throughout his books.
Yes, so when you go into the realm of saying Bhaktivinoda made this up, well, you've just stepped off the edge.
What else do you make up?
Where does it stop?
Yeah.
Maharaj, I was going to ask you a question. If you claim if you're a follower of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Sridhara, it would seem that this position that if you took this position that this was just a preaching strategy, those are incompatible ideas. To be a Shiksha disciple of Srila Sridhara, direct disciple of Prabhupada, or both, and then take this position. It just seems completely irreconcilable. That you could claim to be a follower of Sridhara and take the opposite position.
Well, there are people who claim to be followers of Mahaprabhu and take the opposite position. We lump them all in one big group called Sahajiyas. Originally, there were, 13 or 14 mentioned by Totaram. Totaram, 13. Mm-hmm. We recently extended that verse to include a few more. And it wasn't too far back, somebody said there used to be 13, now there are hundreds. So, and they all claim to be followers of Mahaprabhu, every one of these Sahajiya Upasampradayas. So that's just how, the second generation devotees and even many of Prabhupada's disciples who never had a chance to speak with him personally or sit in a room with him in a casual way or put his shoes on for him or wrap the chadar around his shoulder. And they might be thinking, wow, devotees are so fortunate to be able to do that. And indeed they were. But many of those people who were able to do those things and be very, very close to his divine grace, well, then they fell victim to Maya. And it just wasn't once that this happened in history. This has happened many times in history. Going back one generation before Prabhupada, it came to, two of the top disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta, who were great Sanskrit scholars. They turned against their guru after his disappearance. We saw some of Srila Prabhupada's disciples do that during his presence. They turned against him. We saw others after his disappearance try to usurp the position of Srila Prabhupada, even move into his rooms in the Bombay temple. They wanted to occupy Srila Prabhupada's rooms. They wanted to occupy his seat, many things, his titles, so many things. They wanted to usurp his movement. Luckily, this was a smaller group, and overall, they as individuals pretty much failed. But we see that this happened. So yes, it is hypocritical. Srila Puri Maharaj said, follow in the footsteps very closely. And a lot of times, this happens, one expands his learning, and in doing so, begins to read books hither and thither, here and there, the opinions of scholars and things. But once again, I say these scholars most of them are just that. They're just scholars, armchair philosophers. They are not practitioners. And even amongst some of them that are, there's questions could be raised about their paramparas. They like to raise questions about our paramparas, but let me tell you, people who live in glass houses don't need to throw stones. So instead of caving in to the complaints, like when the Madhva says, oh, you guys quote 24 books that don't exist, we came back and hit him right between the eyes and said, Madhva quotes 200 books that don't exist, so how about that? Instead of acquiescing to these opinions of people outside our sampradaya, who decry our sampradaya, and trying to pacify these scholars and these intellectuals and these Sahajiya deviant groups with their questionable paramparas, it's the duty of the disciple to defend the position of the spiritual master. And sometimes one has to take it a step further to actually explain why the spiritual master said something and what he could have said or would have said under different circumstances. And that might sound strange to your ears, but I bring you the story of Jiva Goswami writing that Swakiya Bhav was the highest and giving indication that his ras was Swakiya Bhav. That's the legitimate paramour love of Krishna between the queens of Dwarka and Lord Krishna. It's called Swakiya. Well, later, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur demonstrated that actually Jiva Goswami is all about Parmor Ras, and what is that word I'm searching for?
Parakiya.
Parakiya Bhav. Parakiya Bhav. Parakiya Ras. The Parmor relation. Breaking that legitimate bond and transgressing the Vedic laws. The Parmor relation. And that it is both higher and it is sweeter to Krishna, and he had to take it, as I just mentioned. Sometimes a disciple may have to explain what the spiritual master would have liked to have said, okay, in a different set of circumstances. I have given an example about Srila Prabhupada wrote articles, Christ is Guru, or Christ in Christo, and things like this. He's come to a Christian country and he's preaching like this, and Srila Prabhupada knew only what the Christians had to say about Christianity. But now, 40, 50 years on, the amount of research that's been done into Christianity, so many new books, new Bibles that they never knew existed before have been found, and it brings Jesus Christ into a very different picture, and in some places even questions that he ever existed at all. So, what Srila Prabhupada may comment about Jesus today may be quite different. He's basically commenting, his comments about Jesus are very Protestant. The British, what did they do? They kicked out the Catholic Church, created the Church of England, killed all the Catholics for centuries, right? Gary, the Catholic, the Church of England is Protestant, not Catholic. You go talk to the Catholic priest in Rome about these Protestants, you'll find out they all live in hell. And if you go to Moscow and talk to the head bishop up there at the Russian Orthodox Church, you'll find out that the Pope himself in Rome is going to hell. So which part of Christianity and Jesus was Prabhupada talking about? He's talking about the part he knew, and to just for to push on the preaching. He was not inventing a philosophy. And it has been said that Sridhar Maharaj was just kowtowing the party line of Bhaktivinoda. It's just like, criminy Christmas. Sridhar Maharaj says, I'm a form breaker, not a form maker. He's not kowtowing.
Straightforward.
Huh?
I'm a straightforward speaker, he said.
Straightforward speaker. And he's carrying the line, not the party line. He's carrying the position of Bhaktivinoda and Bhakti-siddhanta. And he was given the chair of the line of Rupanugas. According to the Rupanuga Sampradaya is actually the inner flow of the Gaudiya Sampradaya. And according to numerous godbrothers of Sridhar Maharaj, and I think foremost amongst them would be Srila Puri Maharaj, but not just Srila Puri Maharaj alone. Numerous godbrothers, Keshav Maharaj and Madhav Maharaj and Saranga Goswami Maharaj and Yajabar Maharaj, they recognized that Bhakti-siddhanta gave Sridhar Maharaj the exalted position as of the chair holder of the Rupanuga Varga. So, if you're a disciple of Sridhar Maharaj by Diksha or Shiksha and or both, please pay special attention. And he gives support in the presence of Bhakti-siddhanta that Jaiva Dharma is brought down from the eternal plane of truth. It is not imaginary, it is not a concoction, neither the stories in it nor the philosophy presented in it. And if you step outside that and say that it is, and just start to kowtow to these mundane philosophers and everything, well, to say the least, I'd have to say, wow, that's a slippery slope. And I've seen where that slope leads for some people. It drops off in the abyss. So it is more the credit of a disciple to try his might to defend the words of his spiritual master, first by understanding them, not simply by quoting them and saying, hey, take it or leave it, that's what it is. There is much description goes into these, to balancing these apparent contradictions that appear. Sometimes Varahadev is white. Sometimes he's red. Lord Boar. Well, what is he? Is he red or is he white? Well, he appears in different kalpas. And in some kalpas he's white, in some kalpas he's red. And sometimes the stories are merged together. Part of the story from one kalpa, where Varaha appeared, or an avatar, and where he's reappeared again in another kalpa in the stories, but then you can find each story different, and there's contradiction. Because one narration is a merger of two things, two leelas, and the other is just a distinct description. So Srila Maharaj said, dive deep. He didn't just leave it at that. He said dive deep, deep, deep. I think he said it more than 3 times, emphasizing this Krishna consciousness is not chant, dance, and be happy only. Certainly a part of it. But it's the ocean, the Bhakti Ras Amrita Sindhu, the great ocean of the nectar of devotion. Its depths are infinite, and it requires our most humble and sincere attention. So, there you have it. You have anything else to say on this?
Just a point I wanted to mention, just on this point about how some people are thinking, some devotees are thinking we've always been here, the world has always been here. Just from the point of view of Nyaya, logic, that makes no sense, because if we've always been here and the world's always been here, why do we have to surrender to Krishna? We have no necessity.
What was that scholar who examined this? Here I'm quoting scholars now. Yeah, you're what is that? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So what did that one what did that one scholar say about the anadi?
Oh, he was a Madhva scholar. His name was H.N. Raghavendra in Mysore. So
okay, so he was in a sampradaya.
Yeah. So back in 1945 or 46, he wrote a book, and in there, he's basically giving the same explanation as Bhaktivinoda Thakura as far as the jivas are concerned. Based on Vedanta Sutra, the second sutra, Janmadhyasya, everything emanates from the Lord. So he said, well, if everything emanates from the Lord, that means that we also emanated from the Lord. We couldn't have always been here.
Yeah,
otherwise, I surrendered to the Lord. And he was buried. The Madhva Sampradaya, they ostracized him, his books were banned, and he was a nobody in the end.
Mm-hmm.
But he gave many arguments for this as well. But he said that there's no need to surrender to somebody we don't have an eternal relationship with, if we've always been here.
I think there was also another gentleman from Europe. Remember we were doing the research? Wasn't there someone who came along and examined this whole argument also between the anadi understandings? No?
I can't remember. I don't
All
think
right,
so.
we'll discuss that later. Maybe something for a future talk.
Yeah.
All right, so we've gone on here a while today, a lot longer than usual. Okay.
Deep subject.
Huh?
Subject.
Interesting subject. I highly recommend anyone who has not read all the books thus published by Srila Maharaj, you please do. And just to honk our own horn here, we have the experience here, the opportunity here. There's a little black box up here on my screen, and I click on it, and the folio of Srila Maharaj opens up, and we do this thing called advanced search, and wow, it's just amazing. Sometimes the depth that he goes into, I have to read it 3 or 4 times, and I'm still, after that, I'm not ready to say anything. He is not on the shore of the ocean of truth. He was a great whale diving deep within the depths of the eternal absolute truth. So, the books are out there. Please avail yourself of these books, and if you have any questions or comments, send them to Let's Talk, and we'll talk about it. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Goswami, Giri Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Talk to you later. Hare Bol.